part of my job at the moment is to observe proceedings in British Parliament where we have legislation going forward. And last week we had a witness, so-called expert witness, Alex Greenwich, who's the MP for Sydney. And he stated that voluntary assisted dying is a form of suicide prevention. And I thought this is very interesting because it's suicide as suicide prevention. And it made me think about the language, which is what I'm going to talk about. So not only is that manifestly untrue, even in his own state of New South Wales, after the law was introduced in 2023, you had suicide rose from 866 to 883, and it increased in the over 65. So it's not true that non-assisted suicides go down when you legalize assisted suicide, but it made me think about the language, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, and it's something that Ashley touched upon in her report. So I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, the questions I had were, what role does evolving language play in influencing legalization or legislation on euthanasia and assisted suicide? And second, what are the effects when we adopt different terms to represent what is essentially suicide, or at least the result of a suicidal impulse? My observations, my points are, first of all, that language changes in areas where there's an attempt to change the law. So euphemisms and obfuscatory language like assisted dying avoid strong terms like suicide, which still at least has some sort of moral taint to it, some sort of moral suggestion. George Orwell warned against, quote, the invasion of one's mind by ready-made phrases. And I think that's something that we really need to take into account with this. The second point that I got out of this is that countries where legalization has already occurred, like Belgium and the Netherlands, employ much more direct terms. So it's marketing, really, marketing language. Third point is that language has a profound effect on meaning, in that when we change these terms, they very much matter. They convey a new sense of meaning and erode the old sense of meaning, and they can alter material reality. It's not simply an etymological issue. It's much more practical in what it does. So first, let's review what these mean. I mean, Ashley has talked about this a little bit, so I don't need to go on about it, but euthanasia means literally good death. But in this discussion, it normally refers to the doctor causing the patient to die, usually by lethal injection. It's legal in Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Colombia, Canada, New Zealand, Spain, and Austria, all 6 states of Australia. Assisted suicide is when the doctor or medical practitioner gives the patient deadly drugs knowing that the patient will use them to kill themselves. And that's legal in Switzerland since 1942, 10 states of the United States, and it's also allowed in all countries that allow euthanasia, except Belgium. Assisted dying varies in its definition. It's used as a sort of umbrella term, but as David Jones has demonstrated in a recent article in the BMJ, there's no agreement about what it means, and it is clearly marketing language. Thus, assisted suicide remains the more common term in the scholarly literature because it's much more accurate in what it talks about. So I thought such insistence on avoiding discussing what is very obviously suicide was restricted to English-speaking countries, but it turns out, upon looking, that it's very common in Europe. So in Belgium and the Netherlands, euthanasia is used without blushing because it's been passed here. But similarly, Switzerland uses suicide assist or Freitodbeglechtung, sorry for murdering the language or euthanizing it, whatever, but my German is not good, which means free death, which is a German expression that conveys suicide and has been for some time. The Swiss Penal Code very accurately talks of euthanasia, where the doctor gives the final draft, as, quote, murder at the request of the victim. It's illegal there, but it attracts a 3-year sentence. So in France, The term preferred by those who advocate a change in the law is protocole de mort, protocols de mort programmée, programmed death protocols. The attempt, he tells Belgian people who may speak a little bit of French, even more than we Canadians. The attempt at changing the law in 2023 did not mention euthanasia or assisted suicide. President Macron told an interviewer he does not like the term euthanasia. Death is a moment in life, he insisted, not a technical act. But think about it, that's exactly what is being reduced to by euthanasia, the legalization of euthanasia. It is a technical act. What should be a profound and awe-inspiring event is reduced to this technical act. Macron insisted that a proposed assisted suicide law was, quote, a law of fraternity, a law that reconciles the autonomy of the individual and the solidarity of the nation. It's difficult to remember that we are talking about killing, that we are talking about either suicide or homicide. It's completely divorced in the way that he looked at it. Such terms are not simply papering over a meaning. They change our perception and have treatment implications in medicine, for instance. In a paper published in the European Association of Palliative Care, it argued that we should declare palliative futility in some situations. And you will know much better than I do, Ole, but to me, palliative care, if we are to take what the World Health Organization defines it as, means not abandoning the dying. It means caring for the dying. It doesn't mean giving up on the dying and actually killing them, even worse, killing them. So what we can all admit is that death may be in a patient's best interest, but there's no evidence that exists or can exist. Who's got the empirical evidence on that? Nobody, because it's by nature impossible. Yep. So we now have the term terminal anorexia. Given that anorexia nervosa and other disorders are psychiatric conditions, the implication is that the psychiatrists and psychologists give up treatment of these patients, or worse, that they consider killing the patient as part of the treatment. And here are the physical manifestations of what I'm talking about, this change in the language. So in a recent report, there are 60 women across the world, and they're all women, who have died by euthanasia and or assisted suicide solely because of an eating disorder. And I think that's something that everybody should keep an eye on, and that is a physical manifestation of what I'm talking about, these redefining words. I have no time because John's telling me to get down, but I would love to go into the origins of these terminological changes. So please do ask questions about that. I'm a historian, and we love talking about how these things occurred in the past. So I think it's to do with the reconsiderations of the moral implications of suicide, but I shall stop there.